Let me share with you an iconic and tasty dish from the place that I was born, Penang. Now Penang is a heaven for any food lovers, and one of the food that's really famous for is Lor Bak. Lor Bak is actually bean curd stuffed with meat. The meat filling is usually pork, but for this recipe, I'm using chicken thighs instead. If you're a vegan, feel free to substitute this with some seitan, tofu, or even tempeh. After slicing the chicken thighs, I'm gonna add in the garlic powder, ginger powder, as well as white pepper. Next, to give it a nutty flavor, I'm gonna throw in some sesame oil, followed by some sweet soy sauce to bring out a nice salty savoriness to it, as well as the nice Chinese spice fragrance. Now I'm gonna set it aside and let it marinate for at least 4 hours. In the meantime, let's do the bean curd sheet. Now you can find this bean curd sheet from your Asian grocers, and they're super useful. You can just throw them in your soup or even add them in your stir fries. Now it's important to note that before using your bean curd sheet, to soak them in warm water to soften them down first. This is the same even if you're going to be using them for soups. Normally I'll soak them for at least 15 to 20 minutes. This will give it enough time for it to come back to its original state before it was dehydrated. Now grandmama used to make this amazing tofu crisp by just deep frying them and season them with some salt for snack. The next thing I'm gonna do is to crack an egg and separate them into egg white and egg yolk. The egg yolk I'm gonna marinate it with my chicken, whereas for the egg white I'm gonna use it as a glue for my beancurd roll. You can also use a cornstarch solution instead of egg white. It's time to wrap the Lor Bak. Now one of the tricks I learned from my mom is to use a paper towel and dab the beancurd sheet. This is to remove the excess water to prevent the oil from splattering when you're going to deep fry the Lor Bak later, and also to prevent some air pockets from forming when you're deep frying them. How you wrap a Lor Bak is exactly the same as how you do for a sushi roll, so you're just gonna make sure that to pull it back as you roll it, making sure that it's tight and dense. After that, we're gonna seal our beancurd roll with a kiss, with some egg white. By the way, there is also a thinner beancurd sheet. If you can get hold of those from your Asian grocers, use those. This is how they will look before we deep fry them. Now a plate of Lor Bak in Penang is usually served alongside some deep fried tofu, century eggs, prawn fritters, fish cakes, and sometimes with some cucumbers on the side. Some vendors even include Taiwanese sausages. Oh my gosh guys, Taiwanese sausages are the bomb in this dish actually. Lor Bak is actually quite an expensive dish back in Malaysia, so we only have them during special occasions. Now it's time to slice out our Lor Bak, and this is our chicken Lor Bak ready to serve. There's 2 dipping sauces served alongside Lor Bak. One is a gelatinous sweet sauce and the other one is a chili sauce. So today I'm just using our sweet chili paste as a dip for our Lor Bak. To my favorite part, time to tuck in. I am super excited to try our chicken Lor Bak today. When you bite into it, it's got a nice slightly crispy layer on the outside and a very juicy meaty filling. I hope you'll give this chicken Lor Bak a go, and if you do, please let me know what you think. If you've got any questions or suggestions, head to our comments section down below and just pop it there. I'll see you next time. Jumpa lagi!